Our next panel covers uplifting communities, enabling socioeconomic growth and opportunities. And here to moderate this conversation is Tatiana Torres and our esteemed panel. You'll meet in just a moment. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me okay out there? Fantastic. What an interesting conversation. I love it. I'm Tatiana Torres. I'm associate partner at Denton Global Advisors, and it is an honor to be here. I'm also a Concordia board member, so thank you for joining us in a very rainy Monday here in New York City. With me here on stage, we have some fantastic individuals, Sheena Meade and Buery. And I want to talk to you about them a little bit before we continue the conversation that we have today, which I know is of interest to many of us. So Sheena.
Yes.
A walking barrier breaker is what I hear people call you for the disenfranchised. CEO of Clean Slate Initiative. You're building a pathway to allow folks that have a record to be expunged and be able to be active citizens in their communities and cities. You're a TED Talk speaker, and I heard it. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
An audacious project winner, but you're a mom, a board member, a wife, bipartisan leader, a woman and activist addressing critical issues that relate to justice. You're just Sheena, just Sheena, right? Okay. Richard, man focused on fighting barriers as well locally here in New York. A New Yorker for life, you're building bridges, elevating the voices of those that are in poverty. You're CEO of Robin Hood Foundation, and you're fighting poverty by funding, supporting, and connecting community organizations that provide a permanent escape from poverty from folks. Thank you for everything that you do. As a daughter of immigrants, as a former New Yorker, as someone that lives in DC, this topic is not just for New York or Florida. This is a nationwide conversation, and I'm excited to be here speaking with you on it. So let me just set the stage for a second. We all went through this thing called COVID-19, the pandemic. People still talk about it. Some of us are still impacted by it. And there's a conversation that we have where we are here in the room today, and we are honored and privileged to be able to be alive for the moment that we're in. Many people did not make that moment. But the impacts of COVID-19 still continue. As of 2021, children are in poverty more than they were before. And folks with a voice are still voiceless. Sheena, I'm going to ask you first. Talk to me about what $87.26 means to you.
Well, thank you for having me and being able to amplify the issue of Clean Slate. So $87.26. We don't have enough time to go through the story, but real quickly, 2004, I wrote a check for $87.26 to feed my children. And I tell folks, back then we didn't have Apple Pay and Cash App and all those different things. So you'll write a check, and if you were someone like me who was operating on faith and hoping that your check would not clear until your direct deposit came, I wrote a check on a weekday, and about 2 months later, 2 cops came and knocked at my door because that check had bounced and returned, and the district attorney decided to prosecute me for a worthless check. And I got arrested in front of my 4 children. At that time, I was a single mother, recovering from the hurricane, sitting us back to back, and low income. And I paid that debt off and thought I could move on with my life. And I didn't realize that my true sentence had really began once I came back, after I came from jail and paid it back, because I was no longer able to participate in my children's school the way I wanted to. I could no longer live where I want to live because the private landlords have discretion about folks who have a record. And I couldn't work where I wanted to work. I even faced barriers going to college, getting admission into college. And so what it means to me is being locked out and having barriers, and my story is not unique. There's between 70 to 114 million Americans. That's 1 in 3 people who have an arrest or a conviction. So just if you look around this room, 1 in 3, someone may not tell this story, but 1 in 3 people in this room have been arrested or have a conviction. And that leaves people out of opportunities. It impacts our economy, and impacts our tax base, our schools, and it just has a trickle effect.
So in what ways can clean slate laws uplift entire communities? You've mentioned a few, but how does this happen? Why, besides your personal lived experience, what have you seen happen because of that, and why dedicate yourself to this cause?
Well, so right now, 94% of employers, over 90% of landlords, and 72% of colleges and universities use background checks to screen applicants, meaning making it harder for people to access jobs, higher education, and housing. And so right now we see that folks are being left out, and it's impacting our economy. Now, what the Clean Slate Initiative does, just about every state across the country has a mechanism to allow people to get their record clear once they've been crime-free, and they have served their time. You know, I'm talking about folks who have minimum, like crimes, as I said, like writing a check or whatever you could think of, right? Nonviolent offenses. But states have, you know, they say you've done your time, but you have to like go through a lot of loopholes, and there's a lot of like red tape. Find a lawyer, pay fees, wait. Some people have to wait 5 to 10 years after their conviction to get the record cleared. And what we're doing is automating that process, saying to the government, do your job. This person you said is allowed to be free and clear, remove the barrier, and we're automating that process across the country. So far, 12 states have started to implement that law.
That's great. So Richard, New Yorker, you're here, Robin Hood Foundation. Given we just mentioned the impacts of COVID-19 that's had on communities, what are the strategies and efforts that Robin Hood Foundation has underway under your leadership to be able to help and fight for that and uplift others and fund others that are in that space as well?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that story. It's always such a gift when we're able to share our stories, and particularly when those stories elucidate a central problem. You know, there's a way in which the story of poverty and opportunity is a complicated one. The ways in which things like criminal laws and housing and education and air quality and food access, how these things conspire to keep people from access to the American dream. But there's also a sense in which poverty is a simple story. It's a simple question. It starts the way you said it, which is fundamentally, poverty is about not having enough money. And how not having enough money has these cascading impacts on one's life. So, you know, at Robin Hood, our approach to the work is relatively straightforward. Our mission is to fight poverty in New York City. We do that by investing in organizations that have demonstrated impact in moving the needle in terms of creating economic opportunity, helping people move permanently out of poverty, but also by investing in public policies that we know, based on the evidence, we know will actually move the needle for those living in poverty. And I talk about money because, you know, right now we've actually experienced in the last couple of years through the pandemic a tremendous real experiment in how poverty works and what it takes to fight poverty.
Absolutely.
Because we know that during the pandemic, thanks to things like the expansion of the child tax credit and the expansion of unemployment insurance, emergency relief for housing, in New York, child poverty was halved during the lowest levels of child poverty we've experienced in the city. And all sorts of research, including real-time research, showing the tremendous impacts it has for families.
Right.
But now we know that all those gains have been lost.
Right.
We know that child poverty in New York has roared back as those policies have retreated. So at Robin Hood, we continue to focus on finding and investing in the most talented entrepreneurs doing the most incredible work. People like you that are driving, whether it be through technology, direct services, driving incredibly and impactful work, but also using what we know about public policy to engage with lawmakers and others to do what we know works, and to help America be a place that lives up to its values in a way that it's never had. But we know it could if we made different choices.
Right. So it's not lost on me or members of the audience. You have 3 people of color sitting on this stage today, 2 women, right? Representing millions and millions of Americans. What is the one systemic challenge that we need to overcome collectively and partner to be able to help those that look like us and those that aren't, that don't look like us, coming together? either question for either of you with the time that we have.
Well, look, you in some ways, I think you answered the question. It is impossible to disentangle
Correct.
the politics of economic opportunity and the politics of poverty from the politics of race. And our country, we know, was built on this powerful idea, inspirational idea, this American dream that where you end up in life should not be determined by where you begin life.
Yes.
It's a uniquely American idea. We know that the idea has never been true. It's always mattered where you came from. It matters if your parents come from Colombia or Panama. It's matter the color of your skin, your gender, your sexuality. But in so many ways, the story of our country, the story of those things, ideally becoming less true year after year, generation after generation. I think for the first time in my adult memory, I feel like that progress, never inevitable progress, but certainly progress, truly feels under threat. And so I think fundamentally to really tackle these questions, I was just saying to a colleague earlier, poverty is a policy choice. We don't have to live this way. We choose to live this way. A big part of why we make these choices is animated by racial oppression and racial animosity. So we have to disentangle and fight the structures of racial oppression so that we have an opportunity to do the hard but possible work
Right.
of building an economy that actually provides opportunity to us all.
That's right. Sheena, 5 seconds. Anything to say?
5 seconds.
I know, this is a topic. I understand.
I would just say it goes back to what you said, people coming together, but also coming together around people with lived experience.
Correct.
And who are directly impacted, and listening to folks who have lived experience, and because they're closest to the problem, they're closest to the solution. And we have to make sure that we're rallying around those folks, and it takes the whole community. That's the one thing I like about the Clean Slate Initiative. Is not just directly impacted people, advocacy, criminal justice. We have business behind us, we have government behind us, we have advocates, policymakers, and folks who have lived experience leading this work across the country.
All right. Well, thank you to Rich. Thank you, Sheena. Thank you to you all for listening. And please follow these two tremendous organizations. They've done great things.
Thank you.